because this is not just a speech. This is a wake-up call. What I'm about to say will shake your soul and flip the script on everything you thought you knew about avoidant exes. You want power? You want control? You want to understand the psychological battlefield they crawl through before crawling back to you? Strap in. Because these are the 7 stages and timelines before an avoidant ex returns. And no one's ever broken it down like this. Let's go. Let me break something down that almost no one is talking about. Something that will make the fog lift instantly once you hear it. When the avoidant left you, they didn't leave in strength. They didn't walk away because they were over you. They didn't go silent because they had clarity or peace or emotional mastery. They left in fear. Not because they didn't care, but because caring scared the hell out of them. See, here's the paradox. Avoidant attachment isn't about lack of love. It's about terror of closeness. And that terror runs so deep, most avoidants don't even realize what they're running from. They think they're escaping conflict or control or obligation. But what they're actually doing is self-sabotage disguised as independence. Their nervous system is programmed for survival, not connection. When intimacy starts to feel real, not just romantic, but deeply seen, vulnerable, exposing, that's when the internal alarms go off, and rather than step toward love, they recoil, they retreat, they ghost, they detach. And from the outside looking in, it feels personal, like you weren't enough, like your love was too much. But the truth, they weren't strong enough to receive what you were giving. That's not a judgment. It's a psychological reality. Avoidants are usually shaped by early emotional environments where their needs were dismissed, minimized, or ignored. They learned not to rely on others because when they did, it hurt. So they built walls. They cultivated self-sufficiency. They made distance their defense. And when you came along, loving, present, emotionally available, it contradicted everything their nervous system believed was safe. And so the deeper you loved, the more dangerous it felt. Here's what you got to understand. When they left you, they weren't running away from your flaws. They were running from the discomfort of being known, being seen, being emotionally naked. That's the intimacy they crave, and fear in equal measure. You didn't scare them away by being too much. You triggered the very thing they were trained to avoid, vulnerability. And make no mistake, in those early days after the breakup, they convinced themselves that leaving was strength. They feel relief. They feel in control because they've returned to their comfort zone, emotional distance. They mistake numbness for peace, but it doesn't last. That false sense of freedom is a nervous system reaction, not truth. And in the stillness that follows, when the silence becomes real and your energy truly starts to disappear, something shifts. The initial relief fades. The mental gymnastics that once justified their detachment begin to collapse. And suddenly, the strength they thought they had starts to look a lot like weakness because there's no one left to mirror their wounds, no one left to hold the emotional space they never learned to hold for themselves. And this is the critical piece. Most people don't realize this. Avoidants don't leave because you were too emotional. They leave because they lack the capacity to hold space for your emotions and their own. That's not your burden to carry. That's not your shame to internalize. That's their emotional homework, their healing process, their mirror to confront. And here's the kicker. Many of them won't even start that process until the pain of your absence outweighs the fear of intimacy. So while you're out here questioning your worth, wondering what you did wrong, asking why they could just walk away so easily, they're not fine. They're not emotionally evolved. They're not at peace. They're in flight mode. Emotional fight or flight. And flight always feels powerful until you realize you're lost. Now, why is this important for you to hear? Because if you don't reframe the story, you'll stay stuck in it. You'll keep giving your power away to a version of the breakup that isn't even accurate. You'll keep romanticizing someone who never even gave you emotional safety. And worst of all, you'll keep chasing closure from someone who couldn't even give you coherence. So here's what I want to tell you directly. You didn't get discarded because you were unlovable. You got distanced because you triggered something sacred and terrifying in them. Real connection. That's not rejection. That's resistance. That's a nervous system that short circuits when faced with vulnerability. And when you start to see it that way, everything changes. You stop personalizing the pain. You stop chasing explanations. You stop making their detachment mean something about your worth instead. You start understanding it for what it is, a trauma-informed pattern playing out on autopilot, a broken emotional GPS leading them back to isolation every time they get close to love. And when you see that, you stop blaming yourself. You start realizing that their leaving wasn't your abandonment. It was their avoidance. You were ready, they weren't, and the space they created, that's not emptiness. That's sacred ground for your evolution. Because here's the raw truth. Sometimes the greatest act of love is standing still while someone runs and choosing not to follow. You let them leave. Not because you gave up, but because you finally understood that their fear can't be your prison. That's power. That's healing. That's you choosing you. And that's the moment the story shifts forever. Because when you see their exit for what it truly was, fear not strength, you stop and start becoming the light they couldn't face. He, light they couldn't hold. M, the light they'll one day remember when the silence gets too loud. And when that day comes, if it comes, you won't be waiting. You'll be rising. Already gone, already glowing, already beyond reach. Because your worth isn't measured by who stays. It's measured by who you become when they don't. Let's clear up a dangerous lie that too many people still believe. When an avoidant ex comes back, it's not some grand romantic epiphany. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a Nicholas Sparks moment. It's not love finally figuring it out. It's regret. It's confusion. It's emotional dissonance finally boiling over into discomfort. That's the truth. And you need to hear it straight. When avoidants return, they don't come back because they've transformed into emotionally secure, grounded individuals. They don't come back because they've suddenly learned how to love you the way you deserved all along. They come back because the silence got too loud. Because your absence triggered something deeper than they were ready to confront. Because the illusion that they could move on without consequence cracked under the weight of reality. Let me explain why this is so critical. Avoidants are experts in the short game. When they leave, they feel relief. They feel powerful. They feel free. They finally have space again. And to them, space equals safety. Their nervous system relaxes, not because they made the right choice, but because they escaped the perceived threat, intimacy. And in that early post-breakup phase, they'll tell themselves 1,000 stories to reinforce their decision. That you were too emotional, that things were getting too serious, that they just needed time to think. But what's really happening under the surface is this. Their fear system is celebrating. Their emotional walls are back up, and for a moment, they feel in control again. But here's the catch. Avoidance isn't sustainable. It's a coping mechanism, not a solution. And eventually, when the chaos settles, the emotions they've been dodging creep back in. The messages you stop sending, they notice. The energy you withdraw, they feel it. The way you stop orbiting their emotional universe, it shakes them. Not because they're evil or manipulative, but because the same fear that drove them away is the same fear that starts whispering, what if you made a mistake? That voice, that discomfort, that's regret. And it doesn't show up as some noble, self-aware, I've grown and I'm ready now confession. No, it shows up as a soft check-in. A random, hey, how have you been? A message that says nothing and everything at the same time. Because avoidants rarely dive back in with vulnerability. They test the waters, they drop bait, they reach out, not because they've finally faced their emotional blocks, but because they're trying to relieve a new kind of pain, the pain of realizing you're actually gone. That moment right there is when the tables turn. Because what they expected was for you to still be there, emotionally, mentally, spiritually available. They assumed you'd still be waiting in the space they once occupied. But what they find instead is emptiness. Not the lonely kind, the powerful kind. The kind of emptiness that says this space has been reclaimed. And now they're the ones experiencing the disconnection. They're the ones navigating silence. They're the ones wondering what you're thinking, who you're with, whether you still feel anything at all. It's disorienting. It's humbling. It's a brand new kind of fear. But here's where it gets even deeper. When they come back, they're not seeking reconciliation. They're seeking relief. Relief from guilt. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from the cognitive dissonance that comes when they start asking themselves, did I push away the one person who actually saw me? That is not love. That is anxiety. That is not commitment. That is craving connection without the cost of vulnerability. And if you don't understand that, if you don't decode the psychology of the return, you'll interpret their regret as readiness. and you'll re-enter a cycle that hasn't healed, just paused. So let me say this with full clarity. Their return is not your validation. It's their confusion. It's their emotional system reaching out for stability, not intimacy. And if you're not grounded in your worth, you'll mistake their uncertainty for devotion. You'll think they finally see you. But what's actually happening is they're finally seeing the consequences of their emotional dysfunction. And still, that doesn't mean they're ready to do anything about it, because for an avoidant to truly change, they have to do the one thing they fear most. Stay through the discomfort. Stay through the closeness. Stay through the mirror of being truly known. And most aren't ready for that. Not yet. So when they return, don't be shocked if they don't offer anything concrete. Don't be surprised if their words are vague, their intentions blurry, their energy unstable. That's what emotional regret looks like in avoidant behavior. It's not a clean, I want you back. It's a messy, I'm lost without you, but I still don't know how to meet you where you are. And your job, your sacred task, is not to rescue them from that pain, is to recognize that pain is theirs to sit with. The moment they left, they opted out of the safe space you held. And if they want to return, it cannot be without transformation, not just in their feelings, but in their capacity. Otherwise, you're just reopening the wound. So when they circle back, pause, breathe, ask yourself, do I want this version of them, or do I just miss the version of me that loved them? Because those are two entirely different motivations. And one will liberate you while the other will trap you in a loop. Let their regret stay theirs. Let their return be a mirror, not a magnet. You don't owe anyone access just because they remembered your value too late, especially not someone who walked away when love got real. The truth is, most avoidants don't come back to offer love. They come back to feel less alone. And the person they expect to soothe them is the very person they abandoned. Don't step back into a pattern you already outgrew, because real love doesn't return out of regret. It returns with readiness. And if they're not ready, you've already won. You've healed the wound they couldn't hold. You become the version of yourself that no longer settles for emotional scraps. You become the lesson they weren't brave enough to learn. Let them regret. You rise. You rise, because you finally understand their comeback isn't your closure. It's your confirmation. You've outgrown the version of yourself who needed to be chosen by someone who couldn't even choose themselves. So here's where everything starts to shift. And I want you to hear this with your soul, not just your mind. After the avoidant X starts to feel the weight of your absence, after the regret sets in, something else happens. Something even more disturbing to them. It's not your silence that breaks them, it's your evolution. Let's make something clear. Avoidants don't just fear intimacy. They fear vulnerability, theirs and yours. Because real connection requires being seen, and that kind of exposure feels like a threat to their very identity. But here's what they don't count on when they walk away from someone like you, that you won't just disappear, you'll grow. See, they expected you to wait, to stay emotionally glued to their ghost, to keep the door cracked open in case they decided to knock again. They underestimated you, and that's where it begins to sting. They assumed you'd stay small. They assumed your life would pause in their absence, but instead you started choosing you. And when that happens, when you stop chasing, stop bleeding, stop justifying, and start healing, something sacred is born. Momentum. And let me tell you something about momentum. Once it starts, it's unstoppable. You begin reading the books, going to the gym, cutting off emotional vampires, learning how to self-regulate, learning how to receive your own love. You start showing up in rooms with your chin higher, your boundaries sharper, your smile real. You stop trying to explain your worth, and you begin embodying it. And you know what that does to the avoidant? It terrifies them. Why? Because it confronts them with their own stagnation. They thought they were free after the breakup, but now they're stuck while you're rising. You're elevating. You're becoming magnetic, not because you're trying to be noticed, but because you finally noticed yourself. Avoidants operate in cycles of control. They need to feel emotionally superior to maintain distance. But when you're no longer begging for closeness, when you no longer need their validation to feel whole, their illusion of control dissolves. It shakes them. And now what they feared most has become reality. You don't need them. Not to feel worthy, not to feel loved, not to feel alive. Let's break this down psychologically. Human beings are wired for significance. It's one of our core needs. The avoidant X was used to feeling significant in your life. Whether they admitted it or not, They enjoyed knowing you were emotionally invested, even if they couldn't fully reciprocate. That gave them a sense of identity. I'm the one they love. I'm the one they miss. I'm the one they'll always be available for. But now that dynamic is dead. They see your glow up. And it doesn't just make them miss you. It makes them question who they are. They start asking themselves things they never had the courage to before. Was I the problem? Why did I run when it was good? Why can't I be that free? Why do they look happier without me than they ever did with me? This isn't just emotional turbulence. This is identity collapse. They're facing the brutal truth. They were afraid of your love, and now they're afraid of your power. It's a paradox. They pushed you away to protect themselves, but now your growth is the very thing that makes them want to come back, and the very thing that makes them believe they don't deserve to. And here's where it gets real. Because now they don't return from a place of confidence, they return from a place of comparison. They show up in your inbox not as someone who wants to co-create, but as someone trying to reattach to what they lost. Not because they're ready, but because your growth revealed their lack. And that's not connection, that's craving. That's not love. That's longing. And if you're not deeply rooted in who you've become, their reappearance will feel flattering. You'll mistake their sudden interest for progress. But it's not, it's reaction. You became the version of you they couldn't imagine, and now they're scrambling to catch up. But let me say this with all the fire in my chest. Your growth is not an invitation for someone to re-enter your life at the same level they left it. Just because they regret doesn't mean they've repaired. Just because they're watching doesn't mean they're ready to walk beside you. Don't let nostalgia blind you to the truth of your progress. You see, your evolution wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving yourself right. It was about discovering the version of you that was buried beneath the people-pleasing, the emotional contortions, the desperation to be enough. That version of you, she's not an act. She's who you really are. And now that she's here, don't shrink her to make someone else comfortable, because let's be honest. If they couldn't love you when you were soft, vulnerable, open, what makes you think they can handle you now, that you're powerful, healed, and whole? This stage, this rebirth, is not the climax of your love story. It's the preface to something greater, something rooted in reciprocity, something worthy of your fire. And if the avoidant doesn't have the courage to meet you where you are now, if they're still operating in old cycles while you're building new paradigms, then their reappearance isn't a romantic turning point. It's a test. One that you were born to pass. So don't fumble the new you for the ghost of who you used to be with them. Remember this, your evolution is not a performance, it's a revelation. And the people who are meant to be in your life, they won't be afraid of your light. They'll rise to meet it. Or they'll step aside. Let your transformation speak louder than their confusion. Let your new life be the boundary. Let your peace be the answer they never saw coming. You grew, you glowed, you let go, and that right there is the win. Now we come to the most unpredictable, emotionally charged, and psychologically fragile moment in the entire avoidance cycle, the tipping point. When they reappear, not as a fully changed, emotionally intelligent, secure person, but as someone whose inner structure has been rattled. Their strategies failed. Their illusion that they were fine without you, correct. But this isn't a storybook return. No music swells, no tidy apology. Instead, it's clumsy, awkward, laced with confusion, because avoidants don't return when you want them to. They return when you least expect it, and not out of clarity, out of discomfort. Let's call it what it is. Emotional dissonance. The moment they realize that their internal belief system, the one that told them, if I disconnect, I'll feel safe, doesn't hold up anymore, because disconnection brought loneliness. Avoidance led to regret. Independence turned into isolation. And your growth, your peace, your refusal to chase, all of that amplified their inner noise. Now let's take this deeper. When they reach this stage, what they're facing is not just the loss of you. It's the confrontation of their own patterns. That's why their return doesn't come with a love letter. It comes with a text at 1:13 a.m. It comes with a vague emoji reply to your story. It comes with, hey, I was thinking about you. It's not bold. It's hesitant. Because it's not just about you. It's about them feeling unsafe in their emotional world and reaching for the last place they felt seen, even if they ran from it. Psychologically, what's happening here is ego collapse. You have to understand this. The avoidant created an identity around being the one in control. They built walls not to hurt you, but to survive their own fears. And now those walls are closing in. They're suffocating inside the very fortress they thought would protect them. And what do people do when they can't breathe? They panic. But here's the dangerous part. When they reappear, it's not because they've grown, it's because they want relief. And you've become associated with emotional oxygen. Let me be very clear. This is not love. It's not healing. It's not reunion. This is the unconscious seeking a hit of comfort. And if you don't know your worth, if you don't anchor yourself in everything you've built, you will interpret their return as a sign that they've changed. But change isn't what they're offering. They're offering proximity, access, a familiar port in the storm of their own mind. And that's not connection, that's a transaction. Avoidants don't know how to process grief properly. They delay it, bury it, replace it with busyness or distractions. But it always comes. And when it does, it's not linear, it's chaotic. They might come back with tears, or they might come back with jokes. They might test the waters before they dive in. Because the truth is, they're terrified you'll reject them. And yet they don't know how to re-enter without expecting you to pick up where they left off. This is where your power becomes critical. You got to recognize the difference between remorse and readiness, between guilt and growth. Because an avoidant ex can feel genuinely sorry for the pain they caused, for the way they vanished, for how they minimized your needs, but still not be equipped to love you in the way you deserve. And here's the trap. Your heart will remember the good. It will want to believe the return is redemptive. But your mind, your healed mind, must filter the moment through truth, not longing. Does their return come with accountability or excuses? Are they curious about your journey or fixated on how much you've changed? Are they offering stability or clinging to nostalgia? Because here's what you need to know. Your evolution disrupted their cycle. You became unrecognizable to the version of them that left. So now they must decide, will they rise or will they repeat? And let's be real, most avoidants don't reappear ready, they reappear rattled, hoping to restore the old dynamic, not co-create a new one. They want the comfort of your presence without the weight of commitment. They want to feel chosen again without doing the choosing themselves. This is why emotional intelligence becomes your shield. If you're not emotionally clear, if you haven't solidified your standards, your worth, your boundaries, you will make the mistake of interpreting a breadcrumb as a banquet. And this is where the pain of growth hits hardest. Because just when you thought the worst was behind you, you'll face the ultimate test. Will you return to what broke you just because it came back dressed as desire? Let me say it straight. The reappearance is not the destination, it's the doorway. What comes next is up to you. If they show signs of real growth, not just emotion, but evolution, and if they demonstrate the capacity to walk beside the new you with respect, presence, and honesty, then maybe there's a new path. But if they're still navigating with the same fear, the same armor, the same patterns, your greatest act of self-love will be to say, I'm not who I was, and I won't shrink to fit who you still are. There's power in the pause. Power in not rushing to label their return as fate. Power in letting their actions speak louder than their presence. You don't need closure in the form of a reunion. Sometimes closure is a mirror, one they hold up to themselves the moment they realize they can't reach you with the same tools that pushed you away. And when they finally come back, not out of fear, but out of fullness, not because they're lonely, but because they're whole, not to soothe themselves, but to see you, then and only then do you even consider letting them close again. Until then, protect your peace. Because real love doesn't knock in the middle of the night asking if the door is still open. It walks through with clarity and stays with consistency. Your growth isn't bait, it's your birthright. Don't let someone's confusion become your crossroads. At them, return, but let them meet the version of you they never expected to face. Because you're no longer waiting, you're leading.